An unassuming motel in Hammond, Indiana, located at the 3800 block of 179th Street. Somewhere around 5 p.m. on Friday, October 17, 2014. It's a calm, cool night at the Motel 6, an affordable place to rest overnight, or partake in other, more short-term activities.
While some turn to this cheap, anonymous venue for pleasure, others use it as a place to inflict pain.
A young woman is brutally murdered in an unspeakable crime that shocks the state of Illinois to its core. But it's only the beginning.
The brazen killing reveals descent into darkness so vile that it grabs the attention of an entire nation.
What starts as one will end as many, and it takes critical cooperation from law enforcement and the use of cutting-edge technology before the brutal killer is finally caught. Elgin, Illinois, 35 miles northwest of Chicago along the Fox River. It's known as the Jewel of the Midwest. With a population of just over 100,000, it is the 6th largest city in the state.
Once known as the butter capital of the world for achieving fame for the butter and dairy goods sold, it's now a vibrant city with a rich history of Victorian architecture.
It is here that Lori Townsend gives birth to a baby girl on April 19, 1995. She names her daughter Afrikka with 2 Ks, a unique and beautiful name for a unique and beautiful new life.
Primarily a gender-neutral name of English origin, meaning from Africa, Lori made sure to have her bundle of joy stand out with the unique spelling.
Growing up, Afrikka always impressed her mom.
She could walk in a room full of people and they just stop and, she was, her smile, her beauty, stunning, my beauty queen.
And stand out Afrikka did. From a young age, she was an extremely charismatic person, able to keep the people around her laughing and happy.
Lori and her daughter eventually moved to the bigger city of Aurora, Illinois, with a population density second only to Chicago.
A strong bond between mother and daughter is extremely powerful. Afrikka and her mother were ready to take on the world.
Lori says her and Afrikka were best friends as she grew up, and there was no evidence of strife between them.
She used to tell me when she was growing up and stuff, Mom, I'm gonna be famous.
Afrikka stays with her mother in Aurora until 2014, just a few months before that fateful night at the Motel 6.
A recent graduate of the Denver Center for 21st Century Learning, Afrikka hungers for independence. So, over the summer, Afrikka moves again, this time on her own to Chicago.
Like many young adults just out of high school, Afrikka is drawn to the big city, and she falls in love with a confident, cavalier crowd.
She's a young social woman and is desperate to meet others with similar qualities such as hers, and it doesn't take long to do so.
Afrikka becomes close with Shamika Cunningham, and Shamika is as confident and cavalier as they come. The two fast friends decide to go into business together.
This is 2014, and prostitution has evolved. The dark trade is now primarily online. It's a revolutionary alternative to traditional sex work.
Afrikka and Shamika begin to offer their services as escorts to earn extra money. They use a website called Backpage.com to connect with potential clients.
Backpage gives escorts the power and control to book and vet their own clients.
It also makes them vulnerable to potential predators who know how to present trustworthy versions of themselves through the veil of a screen.
Even though Afrikka is only 19 years old, she's smart and she's as careful as she can be. She makes it her practice to send messages to friends with details of who she's meeting, where, and at what time, just in case anything unexpected happens.
So just after 5 p.m. on October 17th, Afrikka does what she has so many times before. She sends a text to Shamika, informing her she is meeting with a client nicknamed Big Boy Appetite. Hours later, Shamika hasn't heard back from Afrikka, and she starts to worry. She wonders why the appointment is taking so long.
Shamika often worried about Afrikka, knowing that her friend's outgoing and charismatic personality could potentially attract those that would cause her harm.
She tries calling Afrikka.
8 attempts at contacting her friend without receiving a response. Then she tries texting.
She eventually receives a text back. It states, "Done, was a GD1. Gonna see him soon. Night Girl X."
Alarm bells go off. This is not at all how Afrikka usually talks over text.
Afrikka's friend Shamika immediately suspects her friend may be in trouble.
These women are close friends. Shamika immediately notices a difference in tone and use of slang from her regular text exchanges with Afrikka.
Shamika is extremely worried. With the strange phrasing of the text, maybe her friend Afrikka is trying to signal she needs help. Or maybe Afrikka didn't send the text at all.
Shamika and a male acquaintance rush to investigate. What they find in Afrikka's room is the stuff of nightmares.
They enter with caution, concerned of who or what they might see.
Signs of a struggle. The bed is pulled away from the wall. They call out but receive no response. Then one of them notices an unusual sound.
In the bathtub, Shamika discovers her closest friend, naked and unresponsive. Water from the shower raining down.
Afrikka has no pulse. There's bruising around her neck. Despite all their efforts to protect each other from harm in this dangerous game, it didn't work. Shamika's best friend is gone.
This kind of trauma can leave permanent scars, which may only be diminished after professional counseling. It will be a long time before Shamika can properly process the grotesque and violent scene that she witnessed.
Initially, police arrive at the scene and are unable to find an obvious murder weapon. Instead, they find small, unique articles left behind that allow them to begin to piece together the horrific scenario.
Forensic specialists comb the room and discover several clues. A broken fingernail, a ripped-off shirt button, and a torn condom wrapper, to name a few.
Shamika is convinced that this is the work of Afrikka's scheduled client for that night. Big boy appetite.
The officers see the text message. Done, was a GD1, gonna see him soon. Night Girl X.
Shamika shares her theory with the investigator that the text doesn't sound like Afrikka, and she believes it may have been sent from someone else. Again, Afrikka's client, big boy appetite.
Investigators are looking for any leads, so Shamika pointing out Afrikka's last client is a strong lead.
Would the murderer really have been so brazen to take the time after killing Afrikka to text a message from her phone?
Making matters worse, Afrikka's phone is nowhere to be found at the crime scene.
Murder of this nature, seemingly random in a public place at a busy time of day, is already very concerning to investigators.
But the disturbing detail of the suspicious text puts investigators on red alert. They may not be dealing with your average killer here. Is this a signal that big boy appetite is more cold and calculated than even they can imagine? "19-year-old Afrikka Hardy has been found in the bathtub of a Motel 6 in Illinois. The escort has been strangled to death and left in a bathtub with the shower running. Afrikka's best friend Shamika suspects a client is responsible, a man she met on Backpage.com with the handle of Big Boy Appetite. But investigators aren't yet ready to jump to any conclusions.
This is a brutal crime, and police don't know who they're dealing with here. They want to make sure they examine every clue and leave no stone unturned.
The police waste no time in examining the evidence.
The ripped-off button, it's important because it doesn't match the clothing Afrikka was wearing that night. If this can be matched to a suspect's shirt missing the same button, it will become strong circumstantial evidence of their guilt.
But who's to say the button was either from the murderer or the victim? The Motel 6 chain is highly recognizable and often used in the state. It could have been left behind by anybody.
They also suspect that whoever committed this crime may still possess other condoms of the same brand, linking them even more definitively to the scene.
A definite lead, but investigators realize it's like a needle in a haystack, as the brand name of the condoms are used by a majority of people.
It's also possible DNA may have been left under the broken fingernail that presumably came from Afrikka's hand.
DNA under the fingernails is often a good bet, especially when a crime scene shows signs of a physical altercation.
DNA analysis takes time and requires a suspect to match it with. But in the meantime, they've got a much more direct path to follow.
With escorts and clients connecting online these days, over websites, computers, and cell phones, there may be digital footprints that lead investigators right to Afrikka's killer.
If Afrikka and her clients texted or called each other, then homicide investigators are legally authorized to obtain warrants compelling telecom companies to share cell phone records.
By pulling call data from Afrikka's phone, police are able to find the phone number of the client from that night.
And the phone number leads them to a name, Darren Vann. This is a promising lead, and investigators set about learning as much as they can about Vann. And what they discover is not pleasant.
Darren Vann was born on March 21st, 1971 in Indiana. The specific city is unknown, but it is presumed he grew up in Gary, where he lived for a large part of his life. In 1991, he joins the Marine Corps, but is discharged 2 years later for reasons cited as other than honorable.
Once Darren Vann is relieved of his duties, he finds himself spiraling even more outside of the Corps, as normal day-to-day life seems difficult for him.
Vann struggles to hold down a regular job, working for brief periods at temp agencies.
Temporary work may have been the only work Vann could find. After all, there's a reason why potential employers look out for gaps in resumes or a string of short-term jobs. It indicates the potential employee may be difficult to work with, irresponsible, or socially awkward.
He struggles to hold together his marriage, too. Vann's new wife, Maria Matlock, is 29 years older than him, creating friction in the family between him and her grown children.
Maria's children aren't the biggest supporters of the relationship, as they find Darren Vann to be difficult to handle.
It would be natural for Matlock's children to assume that the much younger man may be taking advantage of their mother, and perhaps not have her best interest at heart. So they were on high alert.
Vann's problems start to compound, and his life becomes a powder keg. In 2004, although he's still married to Maria, Vann is arrested for threatening the life of a woman named Saritha Grant. Grant is described as Vann's girlfriend.
It's a terrifying assault. In the middle of the day, in a public place, Vann douses himself and his girlfriend in gasoline and grabs her around the neck. He holds a lighter in his free hand and threatens to set them both on fire.
This is the definition of extreme behavior. The willingness to burn oneself and a victim alive indicates tremendous mental health issues and potential psychopathology.
It's now blatantly obvious that Darren Vann struggles with his emotions and proves why his life spirals out of control prior to this incident.
Thankfully, officers de-escalate the situation and no one is killed.
Despite the horrifying violence of the encounter and direct witnesses, Vann is charged with a less serious Class D felony.
The maximum time in prison for a Class D felony in the United States is 10 years. However, it can be much shorter due to extenuating circumstances.
This happens a lot in the overburdened American court system. In an effort to resolve cases as quickly as possible, prosecutors will often offer up plea bargains in exchange for reduced sentences. So Vann pleads guilty to a misdemeanor charge of residential entry. In return, the felony charge of intimidation was dropped.
Vann only spends 90 days of his original year-long sentence in prison, and in June 2004, he is once again a free man.
Intimidation? That seems like quite the understatement for a guy who douses his girlfriend in gasoline and threatens to light her on fire.
Even though Darren Vann is out of prison, his life continues to unravel, and he becomes more and more unhinged.
You can imagine, because he had issues when it became clear to his wife that he was involved with other women and possibly violently involved. She left, went to Texas. He followed her, trying to save the marriage. And he immediately got in trouble with Texas authorities. He had sexually assaulted a woman.
The next time Vann is arrested is December 2007, this time for aggravated sexual assault.
Aggravated sexual assault is defined as the most serious form of assault short of actually causing death in the act.
Vann becomes paranoid when he hires a 25-year-old sex worker and spots her talking on the phone. He begins to suspect she's an undercover police officer.
Vann violently attacks the sex worker, hitting her face several times and choking her in the act of a sexual violation. He is arrested shortly after by Texas authorities.
He had sexually assaulted a woman. They don't take kindly to that in Texas. They caught him, arrested him, and put him in prison for 5 years.
Darren Vann is put behind bars for a minimal amount of time based on his track record and crimes he's committed. Yet again, this indicates how overburdened the American system is with offenders.
In 2009, while Vann is serving his sentence, his wife Maria files for divorce. It's another bit of unraveling for an increasingly unstable man. Vann is released from the state penitentiary on July 5th, 2013.
Surprisingly, and despite his volatile history, Vann is designated a low risk for repeat offense.
This makes it tough for police to keep an eye on somebody when a court makes a determination that they're not dangerous.
So Darren Vann returns to Gary, Indiana, with very little legal oversight.
The hope in these situations is that the offender's numerous brushes with the law will set them on a straight and narrow path.
But Darren Vann has committed 2 major violent crimes against women already.
Meaningful change requires meaningful effort, not just an assumption that the perpetrator will smarten up. There is no indication that Vann has learned anything by the time he's released from prison.
Deciding Darren Vann wasn't a threat to society would be the biggest and most deadly mistake justice officials would make. It's 2014, and the body of 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy has been discovered in a Motel 6 in Hammond, Indiana.
Using information pulled from Afrikka's phone, investigators connect her client, Big Boy Appetite, otherwise known as Darren Dion Vann, to Afrikka on the night of the murder.
They acquire security footage from the Motel 6 parking lot to prove that Vann was in the building around the time she was killed. And a warrant goes out for Vann's arrest.
Vann moves around a lot, so there's no guarantee police will track him down easily. But they have an address linked to the cell phone account.
Officers head to the 600 block of West 49th Avenue in Gary, Indiana.
A search warrant is executed on Saturday, October 18th, 2014, the day after the murder.
Afrikka's phone, along with other key pieces of evidence linking Vann to the crime, are found at his residence.
Clothing matches the motel surveillance video, indicating he joined Afrikka Hardy on that night. Condoms match the brand of the torn package at the crime scene. And a shirt is missing a button, exactly the same one as the one found at the Motel 6.
Vann is arrested and taken into custody without incident. Officers confront him with the evidence and their theory of what they think happened to young Afrikka that night.
With Darren Vann's history of being charged with lesser sentences, they need to make sure that all their ducks are in a row in order to make this arrest stick.
Vann is surprised police tracked him down so quickly, saying that he messed up. And then, like he's been waiting to tell the story all along, he opens up.
Vann says yes, admitting that he was at the Motel 6 looking for a good time. And admits he was with Afrikka Hardy on October 17, 2014.
When the sex becomes rough, Vann shares, Afrikka defends herself.
No, she struck me. That's it. I don't like being hit. I don't like people striking me or pushing me.
Darren Vann's honesty of the night in question is an unexpected surprise to law enforcement, as it's not often that they get someone so open.
Vann is a military-trained, twice-convicted, sociopathic sex offender. Afrikka didn't stand a chance.
Vann dumps Afrikka's body in the bathtub and turns the shower on.
For whatever reason, Darren Vann decides he's going to try and buy himself some time. So he takes Afrikka's phone and sends Shamika the now famous bogus text message. Done. Was a GD1. Gonna see him soon. Night girl, X.
In Darren Dion Vann's own words, was the truth of what happened that awful October night to bright, bold 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy. Case closed. Or is it?
After Vann confesses to the murder of Afrikka Hardy, police think they're done with him. But he keeps talking.
Vann tells investigators that he has rage problems and in the past has had difficulty handling his emotions.
I call it my mistakes.
Vann goes on to describe a highly agitated state he can sometimes enter, where the smallest annoyance can set him off.
What are the things that cause you to go into a rage?
Last year, it's really I can't work. They want 7 years, they want this. I went to get my ID, they won't give my ID. It's just so much. I'm just like, I'm tired.
Does it do anything for you?
But it releases, I won't say it releases pressure. Because really, my brother tells me I'm crazy. I tell him all the time, I just want to walk in something. All it does is take the wrong person to say something or it triggers something from my past.
These are classic signs of psychopathy, the ability to compartmentalize and rationalize violence. Vann even talks about how he felt the need to protect his family from his rage.
In times of calm, Vann is rational and even makes plans to anticipate the times when he will lose control. At his core, he is afraid of himself and takes measures to anticipate his own psychopathy and remove loved ones from his eventual path of destruction.
I try to get far away from my family when I feel myself slipping.
Vann calmly admits his lack of self-control has cost him his marriage, his career in the military, and even his freedom. And now, this cost Afrikka Hardy her life.
This disconnect from regular emotions, such as guilt and shame, are a hallmark of sociopathic personalities associated with serial killers. It's what makes their deeds extra chilling for the average person to comprehend.
Darren Vann has been open and honest, and investigators are grateful for his candor. But he's not quite done. He has one more story to share.
Casper. Her nickname on the streets was Casper. She was a prostitute.
How old would you say?
I wouldn't know how old Casper is. I would say late 20s, early 30s. Well, I could be wrong because, you know, they're on drugs. And
well, I'm just asking you to give. I mean, you're also seem to be pretty intelligent, so I think you know what you're talking about.
Okay, she is young. The girl is missing. I think they say she was late 30s, early 40s.
The interrogator sees on this new information, pumping Vann for details, and he obliges.
One is by, you know what Dora Miller is? I think it's Dora Miller Project. One is by Dora Miller. One is by, I want to say, 1, 2, 3 is by Georgia Street, Pavilion Park. The first street on the east side off of Broadway. I usually try to go to Illinois where I have my guns. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
But if I don't have a way to get there or get here, like right now I'm watching my sister's kids, so if I get upset, I can't just leave. I'm on schedule. You see what I'm saying? And that schedule compresses how I do things. Casper was my friend. I didn't mean to kill her.
When will we go and recover her body?
I would do Casper part because she was my friend. She was a good person.
When asked why Vann killed Casper, he blames his anger problems, showing for the first time a bit of remorse.
These weren't supposed to be people I killed.
With Darren Vann being so open about his horrific crimes, he consistently proves time and time again that he knew what he was doing was wrong. Because of that, although investigators are playing nice with him, they know firsthand he's a dark and twisted human being.
Now that the floodgate is open, Vann confesses to killing not just one other woman, but 6 more women, in addition to Afrikka Hardy. All from Gary, Indiana.
I killed her in Gary. All these in Gary I'm giving you.
6 murders in the span of approximately 1 year. Interrogators are blown away at the scope and frequency of the violence.
I'll tell you who wasn't shocked. Thomas Hargrove. The retired investigative journalist and homicide archivist has been trying for years to convince Indiana police that a serial killer has been operating in the Gary area.
Thomas Hargrove has made it his mission to help law enforcement agencies from different districts find connections between otherwise unlinked murders.
The Murder Accountability Project has sought to create a national database easily available to homicide detectives, to homicide supervisors, to the general public about murder. We have created what is without debate or question the most complete accounting available anywhere of homicides committed in the United States, going back to 1976.
Hargrove founded the project in 2015 when he discovered just how many unsolved homicide cases there are in the USA.
According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, between 1965 and 2021, nearly 340,000 homicide cases remain unsolved.
And in 2021, only 51% of homicide cases were solved.
Unlike most nations, there are no layers of review for criminal cases, especially major crimes like homicide. So if a case goes uncleared, if no one was arrested, well, better luck next time.
Hargrove believes with a highly detailed database, algorithms can find connections between murders that might otherwise go unnoticed.
Hargrove's algorithm suggests that there was a serial killer at work in Indiana years before Vann was caught.
A cluster of 15 women who were strangled in Gary, Indiana, starting in the late 1980s, which caught the algorithm's attention. We contacted the Gary Police Department to say, well, is there a possibility that these are serial crimes, that they have a common killer?
His hard data brings up reasonable questions, but when Hargrove shares his findings, he receives a discouraging response.
The public information officer, who said that I've checked with the detectives, and they assure me there are no unsolved serial killings in Gary, Indiana. And when you think about it, logically, that's an impossible thing to say. If the case was unsolved, you don't know who killed it. You don't know who killed the individual.
Unfortunately, Hargrove is right, as police find out when Vann confesses to at least 6 more murders in the Gary, Indiana area. Vann's first victim, 28-year-old Tiara Beatty. On January 13, 2014, she goes out to meet a friend.
Her family members report her missing 3 days later, when they attempt to contact her with no response.
Tiara's mother describes her as mentally ill and says that she trusts people easily.
27-year-old mom Tanya Gatlin also goes missing in January 2014. Her family calls police after she fails to show up at her 2-year-old son's birthday party. 1 month later, on February 7, 2014, Vann claims his next victim, 53-year-old Sonia Billingsley.
This was perhaps a crime of opportunity, because her family says she left the house with curlers in her hair, so they assumed she wouldn't be gone long at all.
36-year-old mother of 4, Christine Williams, is murdered by Vann over the paltry sum of $40.
And on June 26, 2014, 41-year-old Tracy Martin is strangled using her own necklace, which is still on her body when she's found.
Finally, in October 2014, not long before Afrikka Hardy is found in the bathtub of the Motel 6, the body of Anith Jones, 35, from Maryville is discovered on East 43rd Avenue. Vann confesses Jones' murder was a little different than the rest. A mutual friend paid him $500 to kill her over an upcoming legal matter.
These women were in the prime of their lives, with dreams and aspirations, and Darren Vann ended them as though they were nothing, the signs of a cold, calculated serial killer.
Vann's confessions to police are horrific, but his cooperation brings closure to half a dozen families who had no idea what had happened to their missing moms, daughters, and friends.
Officers recover the bodies of 6 additional victims in various abandoned houses, all within 5 miles of each other.
It is a mountain of evidence. Surely the mistakes of the past, believing Vann was not at risk to reoffend all those years ago, ignoring warnings from Thomas Hargrove of a potential serial killer, can now be rectified? As prosecutors prepare to take Darren Vann to trial, a series of setbacks will again throw things into turmoil and threaten to erode this slam-dunk case. 19-year-old Afrikka Hardy is found strangled to death in a Motel 6 in Hammond, Indiana. Police quickly identify Darren Vann as the murderer, and he confesses to killing 6 other women in the year leading up to Afrikka's murder in October 2014. Vann takes police on a gruesome tour of abandoned houses in the Gary, Indiana area to recover the bodies of 6 other victims.
Although a serial killer is off the streets, the public is outraged. They are demanding Vann face the death penalty, which is an option in Indiana.
Since the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1977 in the state of Indiana, 20 people convicted of murder have been executed. And due to the horrific details of Darren Vann's killings, most people want him on that list.
On October 22, 2014, Darren Vann arrives to the initial hearing in the Lake County Criminal Court. Magistrate Kathleen Sullivan presides. What is expected to be an open and shut case has a rocky start.
When asked the standard question, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Vann refuses to respond.
Vann is asked the same question twice more and still does not utter a sound.
It's an odd turn of events after being so open about admitting to the details of the murders with investigators that some speculate it was because the judge was a female.
Vann already has a history of contempt and violence against women. Perhaps the idea of throwing himself upon the mercy of a female judge was too much for him to bear.
The magistrate advises Vann that if he fails to engage in such a simple and fundamental aspect of the trial, he's going to be remaining in jail.
Vann is found in contempt of court. The initial hearing is pushed a week to October 28, 2014. A week later, Vann is better behaved. He responds politely to questions.
Magistrate Sullivan decides to enter a preliminary not guilty plea on his behalf.
Despite the damning evidence, the prosecution only charges Vann with 2 counts of murder. 2 counts of murder in the course of committing a robbery, and 2 counts of robbery resulting in serious bodily injury.
Lake County Prosecuting Attorney Bernard Carter says his counsel is still deciding whether to pursue other murder charges and the death penalty.
Initially, Vann chooses to represent himself, but changes his mind and accepts counsel from court-appointed public defender Matthew Fetch.
And due to the disturbing nature of the case, media from around the country want a piece of this sensational story.
The trial is set for June 22, 2015. But on April 17th, the date gets pushed. A request has been filed for Darren Vann to face the death sentence for his crimes. The trial is pushed to January 25, 2016. During this time, there is also turbulence on the bench.
In December 2015, sitting Judge Diane Ross Boswell steps away from the trial. She's replaced by Judge Samuel Kappas.
The trial is once again rescheduled to July 25, 2016.
Vann is subsequently charged with the murders for 5 additional victims, as well as a rape charge, an attempted murder for another February 2014 attack.
Vann isn't doing well in prison. He throws a carton of excrement at a correctional officer and is charged with battery by bodily waste, still unable to control his temper.
Vann clearly has mental health issues that should be addressed with medication and therapy, but it's a treatment that he won't receive.
Then, on August 15th, 2016, Vann's attorney files a bold motion that Indiana's death penalty is unconstitutional.
It takes 6 months for the Indiana Supreme Court to consider the motion. Ultimately, Vann's challenge is denied, and after years of delay, Darren Vann faces a jury as his trial begins on October 22nd, 2018.
Shockingly, this case is actually moving at a decent speed for the U.S. court system.
With an overburdened court system, you can start to see how prosecutors are motivated to accept plea bargains just to move things along.
The evidence is still overwhelming against Vann. So now, the question on everyone's minds is not whether the alleged serial killer will be convicted of his crimes, but whether he will pay with his life. Finally, on May 4th, 2018, while the families of his victims and media from around the country look on, Vann pleads guilty to all 7 murders. However, as part of the plea bargain, he is spared the death penalty.
Vann is sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole.
It's a disappointing end to those grieving families who desperately wanted Vann to pay for his crimes with his life.
But the silver lining is that Vann will surely pass the rest of his life behind bars, unable to victimize any other women before he dies.
I'd call this a win. Sure, it's going to cost the taxpayers more money in the long run, but this guy's not getting out of prison unless it's in a coffin.
Today, Vann continues to serve his 7 life sentences at the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility. A somewhat satisfying end to a long and brutal legal ordeal, but questions linger.
Could Vann be responsible for even more murders? Could abandoned houses around Gary, Indiana be hiding other evidence of his violent crimes, their families never given peace?
According to homicide archivist Thomas Hargrove, Vann may be responsible for many more murders.
He was living with his brother and his brother's family, and he didn't want to commit violence in his home. So he would leave. He said he would get on a bus, get on a train, and randomly look for victims, which we think was a truthful statement. In fact, if you look, we did a map of the body location sites in Chicago, and there was a linear string of strangulation victims along the Chicago Green Line, which actually is the train that he would have taken.
And Hargrove is not the only one who believes this to be the case. Ben Kubrick, host of Algorithm Crime Podcast, obtained full interrogation recordings where Vann casually confessed to many more murders. 4 or 5 in California, 1 in North Carolina, 2 in Texas, 2 in Milwaukee, 3 in Minnesota, and about 7 in Detroit. And that's just what he could remember offhand.
To this date, only the murders in Hammond and Gary have been officially attributed to Vann. And even then, it was only because he confessed. Years earlier, Thomas Hargrove had been ignored by Indiana law enforcement as to the strong likelihood of a serial killer in the area.
Unfortunately, all 7 of these women died after I contacted the Gary Police Department to ask if it was possible that there was a serial killer. I will spend all of my life wondering if there was something I could have done to try to convince police that there was an active case they should be pursuing hard.
Hargrove believes that America is facing an unsolved homicide crisis.
The United States is now only clearing about 50% of its homicides. That's the worst it's ever been. In fact, it's the worst in the Western world.
He hopes his database will one day provide an invaluable tool to spot patterns of serial killers, but also discourage them in the future.
The good news is that serial killing is on the decline. And that is very good news. Multiple victim killing, mass killing is on the rise. And we don't begin to understand that, and so we're trying to study that now. The surge in overall homicides is something we're trying to study. The good news is serial murder is dwindling, although there are still plenty of them out there.
The FBI estimates that there are between 25 to 50 active serial killers throughout the United States at any given time. And Thomas Hargrove is determined to get it even lower.
It's not glamorous work, but the data he's collecting can save lives, if he can convince people to take an active role in it.
The only way it's going to happen is if a murder has gone uncleared after a year, then the details of that murder shall be reported to the FBI. But there has been no attempt in Congress to pass such a law.
It's a good dream. And while law enforcement failed to heed warnings, which may have helped stop Darren Vann's killing spree, the Murder Accountability Project is making a difference.
Information is power, and knowing more about how serial killers like Vann operate and think can only help us move forward toward a more safe and peaceful society.
In our own little way, we've been able to identify unnoticed serial murders. Just imagine if you had real in-depth information, what a computer could do. We have more than 250,000 unsolved homicides in the United States committed since 1980. Maybe we should be doing something about that. At the very least, we should be documenting in a central place all of those murders. I mean, who would say no to that?
It's an appropriate tribute to Afrikka Hardy to reflect seriously upon it.
While it can't be called a silver lining, the escort's horrible death in October 2014 was not all in vain.
Afrikka Hardy may have lost her life, but it did lead police to her killer, a serial killer, and it likely saved countless others from a similar fate, because Darren Vann was finally caught.
Cell phone account.
Officers head to the 600 block of West 49th Avenue in Gary, Indiana.
A search warrant is executed on Saturday, October 18th, 2014, the day after the murder.
Afrikka's phone, along with other key pieces of evidence linking Vann to the crime, are found at his residence.
Clothing matches the motel surveillance video, indicating he joined Afrikka Hardy on that night. Condoms match the brand of the torn package at the crime scene. And a shirt is missing a button, exactly the same one as the one found at the Motel 6.
Vann is arrested and taken into custody without incident. Officers confront him with the evidence and their theory of what they think happened to young Afrikka that night.
With Darren Vann's history of being charged with lesser sentences, they need to make sure that all their ducks are in a row in order to make this arrest stick.
Vann is surprised police tracked him down so quickly, saying that he messed up. And then, like he's been waiting to tell the story all along, he opens up.
Vann says yes, admitting that he was at the Motel 6 looking for a good time. And admits he was with Afrikka Hardy on October 17, 2014.
When the sex becomes rough, Vann shares, Afrikka defends herself.
No, she shrugged me. That's it. I don't like being hit. I don't like people striking me or pushing me.
Darren Vann's honesty of the night in question is an unexpected surprise to law enforcement, as it's not often that they get someone so open.
Vann is a military-trained, twice convicted.
Because really, my brother tells me I'm crazy. I tell him all the time, if I'm walking something, and all it does is take the wrong person to say something or it triggers something from my past.
These are classic signs of psychopathy, the ability to compartmentalize and rationalize violence. Vann even talks about how he felt the need to protect his family from his rage.
In times of calm, Vann is rational and even makes plans to anticipate the times when he will lose control. At his core, he is afraid of himself and takes measures to anticipate his own psychopathy and remove loved ones from his eventual path of destruction.
I try to get far away from my family when I feel myself slipping.
Vann calmly admits his lack of self-control has cost him his marriage, his career in the military, and even his freedom. And now, this cost Afrikka Hardy her life.
This disconnect from regular emotions, such as guilt and shame, are a hallmark of sociopathic personalities associated with serial killers. It's what makes their deeds extra chilling for the average person to comprehend.
Darren Vann has been open and honest, and investigators are grateful for his candor. But he's not quite done. He has one more story to share.
It's Casper. Her nickname on the streets was Casper. She was a prostitute.
How old would you say?
I wouldn't know how old Casper is. I would say late 20s, early 30s. Well, I could be wrong because, you know, they're on drugs.
Well, I'm just asking you to give. I mean, you're also seem to be pretty intelligent, so I think you know what you're talking about.
Okay, she is young. The girl is missing. I think they say she was late 30s, early 40s.
The interrogator sees on this new information, pumping Vann for details, and he obliges.
One is by, you know what Dora Miller is? I think it's Dora Miller Project. One is by Dora Miller. One is by, I want to say, 1, 2, 3 is by Georgia Street, William Park. The first street on the east side off of Broadway. I usually try to go to Illinois where I have my guns. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
But if I don't have a way to get there or get help, like right now I'm watching my sister's kids, so if I get upset, I can't just leave. I'm on schedule. You see what I'm saying? And that schedule compresses how I do things. Casper was my friend. I didn't mean to kill her.
When will we go and recover her body?
I would do Casper part because she was my friend. She was a good person.
When asked why Vann killed Casper, he blames his anger problems, showing for the first time a bit of remorse.
These weren't supposed to be people I killed.
With Darren Vann being so open about his horrific crimes, he consistently proves time and time again that he knew what he was doing was wrong. Because of that, although investigators are playing nice with him, they know firsthand he's a dark and twisted human being.
Now that the floodgate is open, Vann confesses to killing not just one other woman, but 6 more women, in addition to Afrikka Hardy. All from Gary, Indiana.
I killed her in Gary. All these in Gary I'm giving you.
6 murders in the span of approximately 1 year. Interrogators are blown away at the scope and frequency of the violence.
I'll tell you who wasn't shocked. Thomas Hargrove. The retired investigative journalist and homicide archivist has been trying for years to convince Indiana police that a serial killer has been operating in the Gary area.
Thomas Hargrove has made it his mission to help law enforcement agencies from different districts find connections between otherwise unlinked murders.
The Murder Accountability Project has sought to create a national database easily available to homicide detectives, to homicide supervisors, to the general public about murder. We have created what is without debate or question the most complete accounting available anywhere of homicides committed in the United States, going back to 1976.
Hargrove founded the project in 2015 when he discovered just how many unsolved homicide cases there are in the USA.
According to the FBI's Uniform